All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It looks like we have quite a few people already online here. If you want to just drop your name and maybe where you're tuning in from in the chat, and we'll make a little few introductions there. For those that maybe haven't joined a recent Foundy webinar, my name is Taylor Winchester. I've got my colleague Tim with us here from Foundy. We've got some great guests here today as well, which I'll let them give their own little introductory. But many of you obviously are very familiar with Foundy. Tim, my colleague here, is our head of advertising. I am the director of revenue. We work with clients to help you guys use Foundy, and we're always excited for these webinars and really appreciate you all tuning in. So yeah, let's just, while we see if a few more folks join us, let's start with you, Marcus. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about Fuga and maybe any exciting campaigns or music releases you've worked on recently.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Taylor and Found team. I'm excited to be here. My name is Marcus. I'm originally from Sweden, but I live in Los Angeles and have done so in the past 3 years. I used to tell this story. When I was 12 years old, I discovered Lou Reed and Seinfeld within the same week, and I knew I had to go to New York. So I ended up there doing an internship after college, spent 7 years in New York, and been here 3 years in sunny LA. My background is mainly in the indie music label, but I joined Fuga last summer. I'm doing digital accounts and marketing strategy, where I advise our US and Canadian label partners on release strategy for their upcoming releases, not only here in the US but worldwide. But I am also in touch, working closely with the Apple account here in the US. Some recent releases, we worked with quite a few. One was exciting is a brand new band called the Linda Lindas. They are signed to Epitaph here in Los Angeles. It's a young female punk group. They are between the ages of 11 and 17. So they released a debut album in April. And yeah, I think they were on Fallon this week, if you follow late night TV. Fuga, I'm not sure everybody is aware of what that company is. It's a digital distribution company based in Amsterdam, but we have offices in Los Angeles, New York, Sao Paulo, Brazil, South Korea, all over the world. And yeah, we work with everything from, pretty large electronic acts like Martin Garrix and Don Diablo to big metal bands like Five Finger Death Punch and whatnot, and everything in between. So it's super exciting, and yeah, I hope we're gonna have a good chat here. Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you so
Marcus.
much.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Give us your intro for us here.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Jeff Halliday. Nice to see all of you and not see some of you. I work at Downtown Music Services as the VP of Marketing, and similarly to Marcus, we are advising a lot of our US artist and manager partners here on their release strategy, on how to engage and sort of optimize their usage of some of the tools that we offer and some of the tools that they are also using that we don't. Sound is obviously a huge component in our data collection and advertising offering. And some of the releases that we've found some really interesting results and success with Found recently have been Sadie Jean, who's like a really new up and coming artist out of New York, who just so happens to have put her first or second song out and gotten just massive response. And through Found, we've managed to collect just an amazing amount of data and really started to build out a fan base for her quickly. And then artists like Cheat Codes and Matoma on the dance side, similar to what Marcus was saying, who are a little bit more perennial and known, and therefore obviously have an even more specific advantage to using a tool like Found, because they just have so much sort of innate traffic coming through, whether there's a new release or not. And so, yeah, we focus a lot of our energy on the marketing team on bringing as much visibility to those releases as possible, obviously at DSPs, through playlisting and different marketing efforts, and then also direct to fan through advertising and organic content. So Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you both for being here. I know, as Rebecca had mentioned to us before we went live, we've had quite a bit of positive feedback leading into this webinar. So we're excited to have you guys talking about marketing and music release strategies. Tim, I know most of these folks are probably tuning in or familiar with you, but if you want to give a quick little background as well, just in case, since you'll be chiming in on some of the topics today as well.
Yeah, hello again. It's me, Tim. Yeah, so I am Foundy's head of advertising. So, I look after users like you and make sure that your marketing and advertising campaigns are going off without a hitch. My background has been digital marketing for the past 10 years. Prior to Foundy, I've been on the agency side. So working, with labels, big and small, the majors as well as the indies, and directly with several management companies, around the world, helping them market their releases and tours, so that entails the advertising side of things as well as social media, just general digital strategy. Recent campaigns that have worked that have been pretty cool. There's quite a few. We helped this new sort of digital platform aimed for music supervisors called Midio. We've helped them sort of launch their initial advertising with their new platform launch this week. We've been working with a couple of artists in the LA area, actually, which is always cool to see. I'm from LA, so whenever there's developing artists coming up from LA, we love seeing them be successful. So Prayers is one of them, as well as Bozo. So yeah, a lot of cool campaigns recently.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that, Tim. Well, I just made a note in the chat, but if any of you folks tuning in, if you have questions or maybe topics that you want us to touch on, of course we have a pretty well outlined agenda of things to cover, and we hope and think this will be valuable for you. But of course, if you have any kind of real life scenarios that you're working through right now on upcoming releases, let us know. Drop a question or comment in the chat, and we'll try to address those as we work through this. So, but yeah, thanks again for being here. I guess to kind of go ahead and get started on the conversation here around music release strategy. I'll start with you, Jeff. But when you're working with artists, to kind of build out that release strategy, do you have any kind of like first, I guess, kind of key priorities that you think about that you maybe have conversations around just strategizing before you even get to that point of maybe you are at the point of obviously like uploading to distro and then planning that the next 5, 6, whatever time frame is until the release drops. But what are those few kind of couple like, hey, we've got to start thinking about this before we even really start talking about it?
Certainly, yeah. We tend to start before even getting too deep into the release schedule planning, looking at a health check for a lot of the active platforms that the artist expects to reach goals within, YouTube or YouTube Music, Spotify, even Instagram, and some of the other like social networks that are super associated with music traffic. And looking at specifically what the artist's engagement looks like. When they post organically, how does it do? What are the best performing types of posts for them on, per network? And are they engaging all the different tools on each one of those to actually not just get the most out of each post, but also ultimately they need to hit all those checkboxes so that we can go to those partners like Facebook or Spotify and raise the artist's visibility up in a way that they're going to get excited about. Artists need to be using the collaborative post on Instagram and the community tab on YouTube. There are all these different sort of, bells you need to ring along the way. And we certainly take a proactive approach earlier in the campaign, sort of setting the table and saying to folks, these are the best practices for each of your platforms. Here are the ways that you could probably engage more effectively. And maybe there are examples within their own. Often we find that there's a post or two that have really over-indexed. And right then and there, you can say, like, post more stuff like that. The picture of the band does way better than the picture of dates that they're playing, for instance. Stop posting ad mats, start posting real pictures of real people, and those types of things. And we've gotten great feedback to turn it around. Tim has certainly provided us tons of positive feedback on having the content of your ads include, human faces, and really engaging content within that first few seconds that it's presented. So yeah, that's one of the biggest hoops that we try to get through in early days of a project, is just that health check and sort of resetting a little bit. Not necessarily expectations, but if there's an awareness or reach campaign that needs to begin prior to any release, that we find that out quickly. There are certainly artists out there where the length between releases can allow for a certain like fan dormancy. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of ad spend to just like make sure those folks are awake before you put that first song back out.
I think that's great. I mean, thinking about the obvious algorithms of the world today in the social world, kind of, I guess, testing those a little bit and making sure, to your point, Jeff, if folks haven't been engaged, or you haven't really had a lot of content out recently, when you start to kind of tease that, or even if it's not relevant directly to those releases, it's important to start to really just engage, I guess. How about you, Marcus? Are there any kind of key things that you think of, maybe outside or in addition to what Jeff mentioned, as far as just the social strategy and kind of content strategy?
No, I totally agree with everything Jeff said. Like, we just have another word for it. We call it the digital audit, just to make sure that, everything is, cohesive, and you make sure that you have a link tree or something in your Instagram, so you can drive fans. And are you utilizing spotlights and stuff like that? And also making sure that you have, all the assets ready. Like, if you start a new campaign, you need to have new photos, to have a refresher to keep everything going. And first and foremost, we actually discuss like what is the vision of the artist, and like, because we are here and just helping them to reach the vision, and discussing what should we hone in on. Like, some artists are very good on Instagram, goes live all the time and do that, but some artists are not as comfortable with doing that. But we still need to make sure that we optimize all these platforms. So that is, very similar to what Jeff does. Make sure that, before we start planning, just set the stage and see where is this artist doing well, what should they continue to do, where is room for improvement.
Great. Yeah, great points. And I think that, I'll kind of pivot this over to you, Tim, because I think you've brought it up in past, or we've talked about it, I guess, on past webinars too, thinking about that content strategy, but also the storytelling component behind you. When you're thinking big picture of these releases, what is the vision of the artist, or what story are you trying to tell? And how compelling is that? Is it just putting out more music, or is there a little bit more authenticity behind it? But Tim, are there any kind of additional thoughts you have in those regards, as far as really kind of planning and strategizing from that full cycle standpoint before you even really start talking about the release?
Yeah, I think, Taylor, you hit the nail on the head. It's really about telling that story. Oftentimes with artists, big and small, developing and also established, your fans, if you don't really sort of prime them for what's to come, if you don't give them a reason for wanting to tune into your music, oftentimes, if you just put out that announcement post, hey, my new music is here, you may not get as strong of a reception as you would if you do a little bit of a sort of layup to that release, right? Like Jeff was saying, putting out content out there that sort of reactivates the audience, right? Telling people, hey, we haven't spoken in a while. I've been working on this new thing. Here's a little teaser. Getting people really excited, building that anticipation goes a long way. It not only tells that story, but what it signifies to the algorithm is if you can get people engaging with your content on social, say for the week or two before your release, that your upcoming content, when you actually release your music, is going to be prioritized by the algorithm, because Instagram or whatever social platform you're using will see, wow, people have been engaging with this artist a lot more in the past weeks, and so we should bump this artist's content to the top of their followers' feeds. So that's really helpful. I also wanted to highlight something that both Jeff and Marcus touched on, which is a lot of these platforms like YouTube, Instagram, your social platforms, your streaming platforms, they have a lot of features that many users don't take advantage of. Things like the spotlight, things like the YouTube community. Using these sort of all of the features, all of the different sort of little content formats of a streaming platform, of a social platform. really helps. Usually these sort of content formats are prioritized algorithmically by the platform, and the platforms will sort of support your music, your releases, if you engage with those platforms, because it's in their best interest to promote these tools. So those little features, Instagram Live, YouTube Community, use these things when you're preparing to release.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think it's easy as an artist sometimes to maybe you feel like you're not the most internet or like social media savvy, and you don't necessarily have a lot of content to spread across all the platforms. I know I can say that personally, that I struggle. Like, I don't do TikTok is for my garden, not for my music, but that's just because I'm limited on really being well versed in how to utilize it. So I think it's also, I would look at it and say it's important to point out, like, trying to understand what you feel comfortable with, and maybe it's focusing on one or two of those platforms instead of trying to do all of them, but at least hone in on one that your audience is going to be engaging with you. And to your point, Jeff, when you're thinking about that, like health check or or digital, I forget what you called it, Marcus, but audit, yes, digital audit. Where have you been successful in getting that engagement in the past, and focused on that, because that's likely going to be where your core fan base is, because you've already gotten that engagement. And I think everything that you guys have touched on also makes me think about like the planning that goes into it. I know in years past, and artists that I've worked with, they don't always have the forethought to think about strategy. And so surrounding yourself with folks like, teams that are on the downtown, like Jeff or Fuga and Marcus. And if you don't have the ability to bring in, these major hitters like yourselves, at least kind of getting some outside input on what other folks have seen successful can really be beneficial to kind of having that. And apologies if you hear my dog, there's probably a mailman walking by, or mail woman, but I wanted to ask, drop it in the chat. I know Rebecca dropped a poll in if anybody's had, done a health check on a platform before. It looks like most of you haven't. So if you have any specific questions about that, let us know, and we'll try to answer those as well. As we move forward, thinking about like strategy points and content ideas around those health checks, do you guys have any kind of recommendations on ways to engage content, or engage your fans or potential fans with content pieces that maybe either are relevant to that upcoming release, or maybe aren't? They're just teaser pieces. So, Jeff, do you want to jump in? I saw you nod and said you have some ideas maybe to share with us.
Yeah, I think when we're not even on a content level, but we're definitely still looking at the engagement per platform, like similarly to how you had mentioned, Taylor, looking for those stronger platforms and sort of doubling down there. Obviously, not forgetting the other sources of traffic, but really obviously understanding that if you're an artist who has a ton of traffic on YouTube, that you should put a lot of energy into making sure that traffic grows and continues and so forth. We've seen some tools and analytics suites that I think help you as an artist to use Found even more effectively. Things like a chart metric, where you're able to grab stats from all of your different areas and sort of create a better picture of who your ideal fan is, and then target your ads based on that. There's another tool called Vid Iq, and some very similar ones out there that do kind of the same thing, that it's an overlay for your YouTube channel that you can get, and it'll tell you sort of where you're ranked as far as the effectiveness of your metadata that you've attached to the video, whether you're using end screens properly, if you have enough tags, if they're competitive tags, and that kind of stuff, which can all really play into kind of the digital audit health check that we're talking about. But it's also a live view. So as you're continuing through your campaign, you can run them, it'll run on any video or any of your accounts as they're populating. So you can start to see where the audience peaks and bounds are. That's when I think you can really engage advertising more effectively to reach the people you may have not anticipated would be like hyper interested in your new project.
Those are great points.
One thing
Go
that
ahead.
I would like to add in the pre-release strategy that I often see that a lot of developing artists is overlooking is the importance of building your email database. Like a lot of people are so focused on social growth, which is very important. But once you have collected that email, that email won't get hidden under some algorithm because of some other popular content. So once you have that commitment, you will be able to serve that fan with not only new music, but live shows, merch, but also make sure that you don't just spam them with that. Just do personal emails. Like some artists, as I mentioned, are not comfortable on social media, but I work with artists that likes to do like a lengthy a couple of pages email that they send out, very personal of what they're doing. So make sure that you include a sign up to a mailing list in all your like Foundry smart links, and it's a big one. And even before you might start a pre-save campaign, maybe the week before you would be like, hey, something is bubbling, sign up to my email list to hear it first, and start growing that as early as possible.
That's such a good point, and actually reminds me of another sort of hook that we're constantly trying to throw into people, which is, if you're running a pre-save campaign, don't forget to use the mailing list when the song is out, because a large percentage of people who pre-save a song have lives and may forget that your song is out. It's nothing personal, but if you take the time to engage them that one extra moment when the song drops, and you say, thanks for pre-saving, here's a special treat, maybe like an unreleased tidbit or behind the scenes, and the song itself linked, you're going to see a much, much more fluid click-through from there. And those pre-saves should result in more active plays, theoretically.
Yeah, those are great points. And Tim, I don't know if you saw the question that came in, and apologies if I don't pronounce your name right here, but I think it's Ketsia. What's the best approach to ask for emails? I think there are probably a number of approaches, but Jeff, you mentioned it obviously. With pre-save pages, there are a couple of value adds for asking for people to pre-save or pre-add that upcoming release, and I'll let Tim talk a little bit about that. But one of the unique things that come along with that are you get to generally, if people go in and pre-save or pre-add, you get to capture their email from that action that they've taken. But jump in, Tim. I think you had a few extra points there.
Yeah, so pre-save pre-ad campaign for the uninitiated, it's a tool that's available on Foundry, but essentially what it is it's a link that you can generate for your music before it's released. You send it out to your fans, to your fan base, and you ask them to pre-save your music into their library. And what that effectively does for the fan is, when the music comes out, when it's released, your release is immediately added into their streaming library as a saved release. And what that does for streaming platforms is, streaming platforms are always trying to identify what songs are going to take off, what songs are going to be popular. It's in their best interest to promote those songs to keep people using their platform. So, in that sort of process, they'll look at songs that have a lot of engagement on them, songs that have been saved a lot. And looking at that data, they'll choose to promote the music that has the most engagement, adding it to the editorial playlist or highlighting it on their platform in some way. So when you're setting up a pre-save campaign, you're getting your fans to add the music, to their streaming library before it's released. But what it's demonstrating to the streaming platforms is, wow, right when the song is released, we have 100, 1,000 people immediately saving the song into the streaming library, which demonstrates to them this is something that's worth promoting on our platform. But another sort of beauty of using a pre-save tool like this is, whenever someone pre-saves your music, they can offer up their email as well, and that's a way to sort of bolster your email list. And just tying it all together with the great points that Marcus and Jeff made, one of the big things that you should be focusing on pre-release is what we call sort of collecting your audience, right? If you can just imagine that your audience, they live busy lives, they're distracted, they're sort of all over the place. You may have a fan who's a fan of your music, but they don't follow you they maybe follow you on Instagram, but they don't follow you on Spotify. You don't have their email. And when you have an upcoming release, one of the best things that you can do sort of pre-release is to take those fans wherever they are, and really sort of collect that audience. Ask fans to follow you on Spotify because you have new music coming up. Ask fans to give you your email because you have a new merch release that's coming out right when the release comes out, and you'll offer them a discount. So asking fans to engage with you, and give you follow you on streaming platforms, give you their email. You can do this with your sort of pre-release content, your teaser content, things like that, and offering fans some sort of incentive as well often helps with getting emails. That could be a discount to merch, a download for an acoustic or remix version of a song, a sneak preview of a song, although I know that the distributors don't like when you do that. So there's
We're coming around.
You're coming around to it.
No, I mean, I think the reality is now we've seen so much, and I'm sure Marcus can probably, I don't want to go on this tangent for too long, but we've seen so much teasing of music work, that, it's certainly an action you can do. You just have to be really strategic about it. Making sure that you are collecting that audience while you're teasing, or at least targeting that tease in a way that actually gets people to come back when the song is out is certainly helpful. And then also making sure that you're not teasing it in a way that might disturb some of the other DSPs who you want to support your release when it does come out. And we've seen some of the issues that can happen when too much of a song is on TikTok before it reaches Spotify, and they're maybe not as hot on it editorially. So yeah.
We have a question from Maria that I think is pretty topical for right now. What do you think of text messaging campaigns? We've been seeing the rise of text messaging platforms, over the last few years as a sort of alternative to email platforms. Maria, I think that these platforms are really strong. I think the last time I checked, email open rates, for email campaigns is something like 20 to 30%. For text messaging campaigns, it's closer to like 90%. So, really, they're very strong platforms. But there's a couple of caveats to keep in mind, with text messaging campaigns. First, they can be a little bit intrusive. So I've seen the most effective text message campaigns I see the most efficient use of these campaigns. It's when artists really try to provide a bit of content in addition to just blasting people on text messages. If you're just telling people over and over again, hey, listen to my music, hey, buy my music, you're going to annoy some people, and they may be less receptive to your overall marketing messaging. So really try to offer people, something of substance. Hey, this is a sneak preview of my song. Hey, here's a discount to my merch, whatever it is. When you're doing text message campaigns. And the second thing is, I know text message campaigns or text messaging platforms in general are a little bit more expensive than email platforms. So, they can be a good tool for the artist that has a little bit of budget. If your artist doesn't have enough budget, email will do just fine.
One other thing worth mentioning, and I know we've had a big issue with this for folks on text campaigns, is the lack of global coverage. A lot of these text folks operate in one jurisdiction or country collection, or even just one country. And so what you're left with is an artist who has a text community maybe here in the United States, but by and large, 70% of the remainder of their actual streaming fans are outside of the United States. And so I still think email is a great complement to text because it offers global coverage, and you can put a little bit more nuance and imagery and GIFs and things in an email that do make it dynamic. And as Marcus was saying, some artists get really engaged with how they interact with their fans from a personal, sort of more social level through email. And I think that's so valuable, harder to do through text.
100%.
Yeah, I would add, I've been on the other end, the receiving end of some artists' email campaigns, and I think it's a great way to go back to that authenticity and telling the story, and really giving your fans or potential fans a little bit better, or not better, I should say, more maybe a more in-depth kind of access point to you as a person, as a human being, as opposed to just somebody that sees your music online and listens to it, So again, thinking, and I think this goes across all platforms, email specifically as well, but like thinking about the way you use email versus Instagram versus TikTok and what content makes sense for those platforms versus how you're actually giving a glimpse into your life and your creative process or whatever it may be. But I think the email, what I've seen anyways, is that the interactions with email can be much more detail oriented, and nobody's going to open up a text message that's 2 paragraphs long and probably engage with that as they would maybe if it were an email. So well, let's shift. I mean, I know we've kind of touched about on everything with pre-release strategy. Obviously, I think a really big takeaway is build your audience as much as you can, using tools like the Foundy offers and obviously social media offers, as far as being able to capture that audience data for remarketing purposes, so that when you do move into the release phase, you can then start to use that audience data. So as we shift into that, let's think about like what are things that as week of and or day of release starts to happen. Tim, let's start with you. Where should people really focus their energy as far as making sure things have flipped or updated for that release day campaign or release day strategy?
Yeah, I think following up with Marcus and Jeff's points about doing a health check or digital audit at the beginning of the campaign, when the day actually comes, when the big day actually comes, make sure that you are reskinning your socials and updating your links in your sort of about me bio sections. What we're referring to when we say reskinning socials is updating your profile picture, updating your cover photo on platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. And making sure those little link in bio about me sections have that new link to your music. The changing your cover photo or your profile photo may seem kind of trivial, but it does serve a purpose here. For most people, when they're engaging with their social media feed or their streaming feed, they see tons of content every single day. A different profile photo or a different cover photo, what that does is signify to your audience that there is something big happening that they should be paying attention to. Which will draw people into your profile, draw people into your channels, and then get them to sort of engage. So it's really that thing to turn heads and signify, to people who are looking on. There's something big happening. Now is the time to pay attention. And of course, updating your links in all of your about me bio sections. Even updating the links in the descriptions of your YouTube videos can be really helpful. If you put out a song on YouTube, maybe you put out a song on YouTube 3 years ago, and there's a link to your last album that is in the YouTube description. Change that to hey, get my new album now. That naturally, when people watch your content, when people engage with your release, if they vibe with it, they will go and try to engage further. So create those avenues where people can engage further, whether that's a link in your YouTube description or just putting those links everywhere. And also when you put links to your music in a lot of new places, this will definitely help with your SEO, with your search engine optimization. So when people do search your artist name on Google, new release or whatever, that link will pop up further to the top. I think in addition to that, just making sure that the content that you're putting out, the week of release is authentic. Really sort of captures the energy or the story that you're trying to tell. Getting people excited, telling people why this release is important to you, the inspiration behind it. Again, telling that story and getting people hooked into the narrative of your release, right? And then we can talk a little bit about ads here as well. I think a lot of musicians and people working in music, now know, okay, when I have a new release, I need to set up ads. But there's a bit of a question mark when it comes to, why is it important to set up ads? Why is it important to put advertising dollars behind your release when you're already, announcing things on social media or blasting things out in your email? There's a few reasons for that. One is, even if you're just trying to reach your existing fans on social platforms, the way that these social platforms work nowadays is, if you have 70,000 fans on Instagram, for example, with a social post, you will never be able to reach all of them. it's unfortunate, but these social platforms kind of keep your followers and their feeds sort of hostage. You need to set up ads on those platforms to be able to make sure that your marketing message, your announcement posts reaches all of them. You also want to be setting up ads to make sure that you're reaching both your existing fans and new fans. You always want to be growing your audience. You want to make sure that every single time you have a new release, it's an opportunity to grow your audience, to bring in new blood into the sort of pool, into your fan base. If you're only ever trying to reach existing fans, that the audience doesn't have the opportunity to grow. So make sure you're reaching existing fans, make sure you're reaching new fans. And again, ads on streaming platforms, YouTube ads, for example, when you have these ads set up correctly, it essentially, your video or your content or whatever it is, will end up, on the side of the streaming platform in their data. They can see that, there's a large influx of people coming in to watch your video, to listen to your music. And again, it's these little moments that encourage streaming platforms to then support your music, with additional promotion on their side.
Yeah, all great points. Marcus, I'd love your thoughts on that as well. As far as I think specifically, I'm wondering kind of any ideas for transitioning some of that content that may be utilized in the ad strategy for week of release, so that it doesn't feel too redundant or too repetitive from, what you've been talking about the previous 2 weeks leading up to it. So, are there any content ideas or maybe suggestions you have for the audience on ways to kind of keep that fresh during, either week of or day of the actual release?
Yeah, totally. And even to step away a little bit back is to make sure that you have a schedule, so you don't have to have a social media and ad schedule ahead of time, so you're not coming up on release week and you're like, oh, which post should I do now and what should I do then? And so it's still, so you can plan, because I feel like a lot of developing artists that don't have that team behind them, they are like, okay, it's out, and just do like one post or something like that. So make sure that you have a schedule and you have a plan for week of release and week after. And as Jeff mentioned, make sure you have an email schedule that says thank you to everybody who has pre-saved. And I also saw a question about how important with video is for a single. I said, and different artists work with different budget, but I feel like it's super crucial to have some kind of visual, not only to have it, on YouTube and how represent your music, but to use in ads, to use as canvas on Spotify. So you can create one video that you can use in so many different ways. And to your point, Taylor, is like, I think if upon release, don't have a new fresh ad set that includes this visual for the ads that goes out.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think about like the strategy leading up to it. Obviously, your content is important and being creative to some degree, but also what are you doing to engage that fan and actually get them to engage with your content? And one thing that I've seen some success with is, when you're going through like artwork, for example, maybe you have different versions or the same version, but they're different colors. And then literally you throw those 2 or 3 or 4 options up in a carousel of images on Instagram, and you ask for people's feedback, like which color do you like the best? And, I personally have done that on my, on one of my releases. And that, if you do that 2 weeks, you may already know which color you're going to go with, but that just gets people, again, engaging, commenting, giving you feedback, which then is a touch point, so that then when you are on that day of release, they see that video drop or whatever that new piece of content is, it's either going to pop to the top of the feed because of the algorithms, or it's at least just something they've already thought about. So I think those are important things to also work into that, is how do you use your content strategy to also ask for that engagement from your fans and from people that follow you on the social platforms.
Yeah, and it's similar to that. If you're lucky enough to do a physical release, like unboxing videos can be very popular and even have their own, viral moments. So if you're lucky enough to have a release on vinyl and actually on time, definitely they do an unboxing video.
Yeah, that definitely works on social. I've also seen folks use those unboxing videos. They'll upload them to YouTube, and maybe they don't want it to be an actual like video that lives on their YouTube, so they'll keep it unlisted. but then they'll grab that YouTube embed code, drop it in one of Foundy's HTML5 video ads, and you can create all of this stuff right on Foundy once you have the HTML code from the or the iframe code from the YouTube. And then you run that ad on, you know, music centric sites like a Rolling Stone or Pitchfork or Paste Magazine. And that unboxing video is so much more personal than just a music video. And I think that is something sometimes as like an up and coming artist, you think that you have to have like really high quality, overly produced video content, but oftentimes what actually engages people more than anything is stuff that's shot on an iPhone of them in their living room, and it's not necessarily like super highly produced, because that feels more connected, you know, a little bit more authentic and more of an ability to, as a fan, to connect with that artist. So I think that's a great point. You know, unboxing, and even if it's not unboxing, I mean, I think you could also do, if you don't have the physical, you could do, you know, like a live on Instagram listening party. I know sometimes they shut that down if the track is you know, flagged or whatever, but you know, finding ways to, again, be authentic and engage and give those fans, especially if you're somebody that has a bunch of fans already, an opportunity to come into your world, as opposed to just seeing you in the feed or just seeing a story with your, you know, graphic of your artist or your release coming up. So I think those are all great points.
Yeah, totally. And I always recommend to keep it very personal. Like, yeah, at some point you're probably going to post, or having to post up, you know, the pack shot, the art, but like on release day, be fun with it. Like record yourself on video, like thanking everybody that has pre-saved, like checking it out, and just because that is like, you know, social media 101, authenticity, right?
Yeah, it's easy to forget that, and I think you brought it up, Marcus. Like, you know, you as an artist, sometimes you worry about posting about the same thing too often, but you have to get a little bit creative. I've seen artists that'll say, hey, you know, how are you liking the new song? What's your favorite line? What's your favorite lyric? You know, things like that that draw them into and make them think more about what it is they're listening to than just like, oh, it's a new song, cool, and then they go on to the next one. So those are great points. I think I saw a question also about some budgets. So ad spend, you know, if you're an artist or a band with a few single releases and only 1 to 2K followers, Marcus, Jeff, I know you guys have both, I know Tim has as well, all ran campaigns and helped execute campaigns. So who wants to jump in here and maybe give some insight onto how to plan a budget, where to allocate some of those? Go for it, Tim.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in before Marcus and Jeff jump in, because I know that they typically work with bands that have bigger budgets than maybe a lot of you guys. So I wanted to sort of set the context a little bit. That's a really good question, Max. You know, it's one that we get asked all the time. How much budget should we be spending on a release? I think, without giving you a sort of definitive dollar answer, I think there's a lot of factors that you need to consider before setting a budget. The first is probably, you know, how big of a priority is your release, right? If there's a song that you just, you know, you wrote in a night, and it's something that you're just kind of releasing because you want to get your fans excited, versus your magnum opus album. This is an album that you've been working on for the past 10 years. You know, you spent 100 hours in some studio in LA, you know, making this album. I mean, that you're probably going to want to spend more budget, you know, on that sort of big release, right? So making sure that you're asking yourself, you know, how big of a priority is this release is definitely one factor. The second is, you know, thinking about your target audience, and how big that target audience is. You know, if you are trying to just reach your existing fans in a city, you know, your budget would be smaller, versus if you're trying to reach, you know, all rock fans across the state of California or in the country of Mexico, your budget's going to be bigger. So think about, you know, what your objective is, what your target audience is, and as well as a priority for the release. And the third thing is, you know, it kind of goes without saying, but, you know, how much can you afford, right? You know, with ads, you don't want to be, you know, using all of your lunch money, you know, for ads for that run for, you know, a couple weeks for one release, right? Oftentimes we see that the most successful ad campaigns are the ones that have a sort of sustained push over a series of weeks or even a series of months, if you're constantly, you know, refreshing it in different ways with new content, like Marcus was saying. So making sure that, you know, that from a budget standpoint, you know, you can afford to keep messaging this thing. You know, and you know, that those are definitely factors that you should consider.
Yeah, those are great points. And I would just add to that, Max, I think you referenced specifically IG. Something to think about is also diversifying where you're actually executing ads. Of course, social is important. I think Jeff mentioned it earlier, or maybe it was Marcus when you were talking about, obviously everybody wants to increase social following, and that goes a long ways when you're trying to pitch yourself to an agency to start repping you on the touring side or a label or whatever. But at the same point in time, if you're only building an audience on one platform and you're not reaching people, what about all the people that don't use Instagram? That maybe use TikTok, or maybe people that don't use socials at all, but like to listen to music. So thinking about how to spread that budget across, thinking about it in a funnel concept is something that I like to do. And, I think in music, sometimes you don't think about it because it's not as traditional as like a sales, like a B2C sale, but, you have to fill people, new listeners, new blood, as Tim was talking about, into that funnel. And then it's going to sometimes take multiple touch points to get them to buy into you as an artist, or you as a person and a human being in that personal level. So, if you can find people on music centric websites, for example, that would fall within the genre of music you're putting out there, then you're, in some ways, you're pre-qualifying them. So that's something to consider. Carlene just jumped in. What platforms do Foundy ads? So Foundy ads are display banner ads, which are a little bit different. We don't, none of our ads execute on social. So we oftentimes say that you need to be doing both. If you can run display ads for people that aren't going to be on social media all the time, you can, on Foundy, you can literally target, Americana websites, which could include, your pitchfork.com, Paste Magazine, and there's no minimum spend. So you could literally set up a campaign for $200 targeting these, Americana domains, and then have another campaign over here on social, targeting anybody that came to your music page with another piece of content, so that whole remarketing concept as well. I don't want to take up all, so I want to jump over to Marcus and Jeff. Obviously, you do work with larger artists, but do you have any recommendations on kind of strategizing a budget?
Yeah, certainly. I actually think Tim's last point there is one of our most sort of present ones, which is like, what's your overall marketing budget for the campaign as a whole, this single, the next single, so forth through your album, and then what are the goals associated with each of those singles and album? What are the tentpole moments? Are you performing during any of this? There's just so much that goes into that period of time, and sort of how you break down those budgets can also depend on where your goals lie as far as specific platforms. A good example of that might be you're really wanting to up the band's visibility within the industry because this next record is going to be their one where you want to start going out for nominations, not just for the Grammys, but for all the other indie awards. That's when I think Found and getting on those music blogs is such a massive help and a win, because the population on those blogs and music websites is a lot of industry folks. It's a great complement to the folks who might see you on your social feed, who probably by and large are more, listener fan type. And the folks who you'll see on a Pitchfork or a Stereo Gum every day are like your hyper listeners, your industry professionals, and definitely folks who I think take a more proactive role in the way that they engage with music, both as a medium and then also reading about music, watching video about music, and just checking out all the other amazing things that you can kind of learn about a band. So that's where I see sort of the complement in some ways, and also the fact that you can get in the face of the same folks who are going to Pitchfork or Stereo Gum or Complex to read about a band. Getting a press on Pitchfork, theoretically, any band could do, but it is so, press is very expensive, and you're then fighting a battle against lots and lots of other artists who want to get a good review. And then even if you do get a good review, or you get a review, it might not be great. Sometimes websites don't feel the same way about your record that lots of your fans do. I think a really, really sort of perfectly half subjective and objective way to present music to your fans is through those websites, but through ads. So that they're on Pitchfork, they're already there, they're on Stereo Gum or Complex, but your music is there too, just not contextualized by some writer. or a content creator who works for that magazine. And especially if you use a really great ad content piece, like something Taylor had suggested, and some of the amazing suggestions I've even gotten from Tim during our ad campaigns, it will work a lot better because there are just certain sort of data-driven assumptions you can make about an ad set, and they will hold true like 99.9% of the time.
And
Yeah, great points. Go ahead, Marcus.
yeah, I don't have much to add, and it's, as mentioned, it's very tough to give a budget. But what my recommendation is, I would always, start with digital ads before you're going to even approach a publicist or a radio team or anything like that. So start building your community and find your fans that way. And also you utilize, Discord or Reddit. There's so many different, great subreddits, and start posting there organically. And but yeah, it's very hard to give a definite answer on how much you should spend, but I would definitely recommend doing so. Start building that audience before even start thinking of, radio or press campaign. Because I sometimes have clients that has coming with, a publicity campaign of maybe $3,000, and I'm looking, their ad budget is 500, and I think that's it should be the opposite. But then again, there's not many publicists you can get for $500.
True. Great point. Yeah, I mean, there's so much context that goes into it, so it is really hard to like give you a definitive answer. And I mean, wow, this has been jam packed with a lot of really, what I believe is really good content. We're already pushing up against the hour here. So if any of you viewers out there, you have any other questions, drop them in real quick. If we can't get to them, in the next 5 minutes, we'll of course try to follow up with you in our recap email with some more details. But to also think about, we haven't really talked about post-release. I know Tim mentioned and Jeff, you guys talked about kind of that campaign strategy. I think it is important to think about what happens the week after, the 2 weeks after, 3 weeks after. How do you keep that content fresh? What other things can you do? Are you doing a tour that's supporting that new release? Did you book a album release show in your hometown? You can, Tim mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned it, but I know in our newsletter this month, you mentioned, dropping in acoustic versions. If you did this great studio album with a full band and a lot of kind of production overlaid onto that, drop 1 or 2 of those singles in an acoustic version 3 weeks out from when that release went live. That will also keep that in front of people, but won't necessarily be showing them the same exact version or listening to the same exact thing. So those are some things to think about. Tim, do you have anything you want to jump in and add before we run out of time?
Yeah, I think, this again goes back to, Katsia's question that Marcus answered, which was, how essential is video content? I think there's a pitfall that faces a lot of artists, which is you talk about your release so much before your release, and then during your release, fans will maybe pay attention right when your release is out. And then 2 weeks later, they stop engaging because you stop talking about it. So, in the sort of 2-3 weeks, month after your release, you should always be trying to find new ways to sort of revitalize your release, new ways to sort of breathe new life into your release, and give fans a reason to come back. You put out a song and then a week later you put out a music video. This gives fans another reason to go back and re-engage with your release. A week after that, you put out a lyric video or an unboxing video for the upcoming vinyl. This gives fans, another avenue, another reason to go back and to re-engage with your release. So you're constantly breathing new life into your release, and that's kind of the beauty of video content. But I think in addition to video content, like Taylor was saying, doing setting up events, maybe they're digital events like a live stream, or they're in-person promotional events. You're trying to give fans this sort of avenue for them to engage with you further, for them to form a deep connection with your music so that they can become those sort of super fans that will, spread the word about your music. If you have the attention from your fans, because of your new release, give your fans ways to support you further. Offer merchandise, a new T-shirt or physical releases of your music. Offer tickets to an upcoming show. Give fans that sort of that channel where they can, where they can really engage with you further if they like your music.
Those are great. I know we're pushing up against the hour. Jeff, Marcus, I know you guys are busy, so I want to say before we hit the hour, thank you so much for joining us. If you do have to jump, I know you probably have other calls coming up in events, so feel free to jump. Tim and I can stay on for another couple minutes and answer any other questions as well. Maria has a question about a few resources to perform a good health check. I know Jeff dropped a few of those. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Vid Iq as a resource. I think, the other thought in that is, as opposed to, if, there aren't necessarily, a lot of times I would venture to guess that it's Marcus and Jeff have teams that are working with these artists that kind of have their checklist. But what you can do, Maria, is really look at other artists that you aspire to be and that you look up to, and see what did they do. Go back and look at their social media strategy for that 2-week, 3-week prior to their release, on through the release date, and then a couple of weeks after, and then compare some of those things. Trying to really, when I know Marcus mentioned, when you're putting a digital audit together, it's looking at what content have you put out in the last 2 or 3 months on your social platforms that have engaged your fans the most, or your community the most, and how do you work those pieces of content strategy into that new that new release strategy, right? So if you know that 2 months ago there were these 3 posts within a 3-week span that really got a lot of engagement, how can you repurpose those content ideas or whatever it is you used in those 3 posts to be a part of this new strategy, and really kind of scheduling out what that looks like over the 6-week timeline, 3-week leading up, 3-week following. So I don't know, Tim's dropped a couple things in there, but in addition to obviously tech things, it's more than anything, I think what they're alluding to is really just being strategic about looking at what you've done that's done well for you in the past, and how you can reapply those things to what's coming up in the future. And then also looking at other people that are successful and have done well for themselves, and other artists that you look up to see what they're doing, and how can you incorporate some of those things into your own authentic strategy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great, Taylor. Agree with that totally.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I know we still got a few people on, so if there aren't any more questions, or if you do have questions, you know how to find us through your Foundy account. Feel free to reach out, and thanks as always. We'll have another one of these webinars at the end of May, 1st of June. So stay tuned for that, and we appreciate you being here and using our Foundy platform.
Thanks, everyone. All right.
Yes, Arlene, we'll include some of these resources in the follow-up email.
Cool.
All right. Thanks. We're going to sign off. We'll see you next time.
Bye.